We're going to start using our network, this network here that we've created in the past. What we're going to do is promote this to being a domain controller, join this computer to the domain, and then we'll set up some group policies and some shares and settings as mentioned in the previous video. So let's open up VirtualBox. I'm going to start all three machines. Okay, so it says that my Zero Shell was attached to a Qualcomm wireless network adapter, so I'm going to change that network, and that one's fine. That's just because I had this virtual machine on a laptop and it was using a wireless adapter to get out to the internet, so we had to change it. Okay, so our Zero Shell is up and running. That's our ADSL modem router. When we look at our diagram, our network diagram, that's what it is. So I can minimize that out of the road temporarily. You can see the screen tearing on the server. That just means, and also on the Windows 10 machine, that just means that the guest editions has been installed, the driver. Let's not forget that the right control key is our host key. Control delete, type in the password. Okay, that's server up and running. And I'm going to log into, I've got Yoda and student, so let's log into Yoda. Okay, password 9. I'm just going to check that, it actually doesn't really matter, Yoda or student, whether they're administrators on this machine, because we're going to join it to the domain anyway. So back to our server here. The first thing we need to do is just to check the local server to make sure that all the settings are in place. So we've got the IP address 3.2, it's called server, it's currently in a work group. We've got our enhanced security configuration turned off, and also our Windows Defender firewall is turned off to allow pings between it and the Windows 10 machine. So if I was running CMD, let's open the file location, and then what I'll do is I'll send it to the desktop or something like that. Send it to the desktop, there we go. So I've got it on the desktop now. Okay, so if I ping 192.168.3.1, which is the gateway, that's working. Let's ping the server 3.2, that is also working. So, and if I do an IP config/all, you can see here that this is 3.10. Which is an IP address it got because it's DHCP enabled, and we got it off the DHCP server, which was our gateway 3.1. We've also got the DNS settings in here, so in theory I can also ping www.google.com, and it name resolves back to an IP address, and that's because my DNS settings here allow me to get back out to to the actual internet and to name resolve. So connectivity is quite fine at the moment. The name of this machine's probably the interesting part. So if I open that up, right mouse click on this PC, down to properties. You can see some awkward name that I've got. You know, desktop hyphen blah 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 blah. I'm going to rename this PC and call it Win 10 Pro. Next. Restart now. Restart anyway. Okay, so that's this Windows 10 restarting. So while that's restarting, I can continue working on our server. And on our server, I need to promote this to being a domain controller, because at the moment it hasn't got it in. If you look in the tools, you won't see any Active Directory stuff at the top here. So what we need to do is go back to the dashboard, and we need to add roles and features. And in here, we just go next. And we're going to add a role or a feature, not set up remote desktop services. So we're going to go next. It's this current server, next. And what we want is this Active Directory domain services. It asks us if we want to add the features, and we're going to go add features. So Active Directory domain services. We're going to go next. It suggests the features which we've already put, because it asked us to already. We can go next, next, and then install. Okay, so this will install the required features, all the prerequisites to starting this up as a domain controller. And so while we're installing these roles and features, we haven't actually promoted it to being a domain controller as yet. So once this is finished, and we'll see this little bar here get across to the end, and then it'll tell us that it's completed. This generally takes a little bit of time. So at this point, I'll just quickly pause. So you can see that our installation has started, and the bar has progressed. I'll just wait till it gets to the end. Oops, there it is. Installation has succeeded on the server. So I can close this now. And you'll notice in the notification area here, if I click on the notifications, as a post-deployment configuration, it says promote this server to being a domain controller. Now when you click on this hyperlink, what happens is you're running that wizard. Okay, so let's click on that to run the wizard. And this is the deployment configuration wizard. And so it's important to go through all this and get it just right. What we're doing is we're not adding a domain controller to an existing domain, because we're creating a brand new one. We're also not adding the domain to an existing forest. What we're doing is we're actually creating a brand new forest. Okay, so we're going to click on forest, and my suggestion for the root domain name is to use your initials .local. So in my case, that's bmw.local. And I'm going to go next. You'll see this bar scream across the top here. While that's moving along, you can't actually do much. You have to wait until it finishes. It says here the forest functional level and the domain functional level. These, you can have backward compatibility, in this case back to server 2008. We're going to leave it at server 2016, but what that means is you can't put in an older server. You can only use server 2016 or server 2019. You'll notice that it's going to automatically install DNS. And grayed out, because you can't change it, this is the first domain controller in a new domain in a forest, therefore it must be the global catalog server. Okay, so that feature's ticked and grayed out so that we can't change it. So we just put in the password here. I'm going to use my standard password 9. Password 9 and go next. This is just a warning for the DNS option. I don't want to specify or create a DNS delegation to somewhere else. I want this machine to become the DNS server. So I'm just going to go next. The NetBIOS name is a short version of the domain name that's used within the immediate local area network. So it'll come up as BMW without the .local. Okay, so we're going to go next. And you'll see okay, so now we've got the Active Directory databases, the folders, so the database folder, the log folder, and the sysvol. I don't mess with these are the defaults. There's lots of applications that we might install later on that assume that we're using the default folders, so it's best not to mess with them. So just go next. This is a review, so this tells us what we've clicked so far. We could also view the script, and this is the script that you would run if you were doing this at the command line in PowerShell. Okay, we're not doing that, so we're just going to go next. So what it's doing now is it's doing a prerequisites check. It'll give us a couple of warnings and then tell us that we're all okay and we're okay to continue the install. So here's the two warnings. The first warning says that 2019 domain controller has a security setting named allow cryptography algorithms compatible with Windows NT4, i.e. a backward compatibility that prevents weaker cryptography algorithms when establishing security channel sessions. Okay, it just means that the thing's backwardly compatible with NT4, and yeah, that's okay, that's fine. And then the second warning is really about the DNS server. So the delegation, because it can't find an authoritative parent zone, that's because we don't have a DNS server yet, so it's going to create one. So if you scroll down, you'll see that prerequisite checks completed and it was all okay, passed successfully. So just click install to continue. So we're going to click the install. Okay, you can see here that it's waiting for the DNS installation to finish. So it's installing DNS on this server, which is exactly what we want. This process doesn't take that long. It's generally a couple of minutes, and then it's going to want to do a restart, which is fine. So while this is continuing to do the install, I'm just going to flick over to the Windows 10 machine, which has finished doing its restart. I'm going to log back in, and everything seems to be okay. We're just going to check the name of the machine. Right mouse click on this and go to properties. And it says that it's now called Windows 10 Pro, which is going to be a lot easier to handle rather than that awkward name that it was originally going to do. Okay, so the Windows 10 machine's quite fine. It's ready to go to join the domain. Once my server, which is over here, has finished, I've still got the little line going across the top here, so it's not finished yet, so I'll just pause until it's actually finished. So you can see here that it's just done a restart, so it's finished doing the install. That's good, that took a fair while. Screen tearing because of the VirtualBox Guest Edition driver. Its graphics driver is not as good as the standard Windows driver, so we get this screen tearing, but it's all the other features that we want. Things like drag and drop between the desktops, folder sharing, PXE booting, a whole range of other stuff that are useful. So that's why we install it. Okay, so while this server is rebooting, you'll find that it applies the computer settings because of the fact that it's now a domain controller, and consequently takes a fair bit longer to boot up than a standard operating system would. So we'll just wait until it's finished booting, and you'll see that it'll automatically want to boot into the domain rather than the local machine. Okay, so the server's now rebooted, and Control-Alt-Delete into the server using the host key and the delete key. You'll notice that it's now trying to boot into the domain. My domain is bmw.local. So this is the normal way, BMW, the domain name, / and then the account. So that's password 9 in my case. And this machine is now a domain controller. And so it'll start the server manager up, and we'll have a look at the tools, and we'll see there'll also be a whole bunch more tools in here, including DNS and Active Directory stuff here. And we'll see more stuff on the tools folder over here. So we just got to wait for it to finish loading up. Windows is good at the moment. You can see this little blue line that goes across here. That tells us that it's still working. Another thing you'll notice is these services. There's one service that hasn't started properly yet. Later on we can go and have a look at which service that actually is and start it if it doesn't start. You'll notice that your Active Directory domain services and your DNS popped up in here now. All our services are actually now green. And if we look at the tools, you'll see that we've got a lot more stuff in here now. We've got Active Directory, sites, services, users and computers. This ADSI edit is essentially a registry editor for Active Directory. So incredibly powerful, but also incredibly dangerous. So you can really do some damage with that. We've also got things like group policy management. We've also got DNS because it installed DNS straight away. So we've also got print management and a few other things in here as well. So I'm going to click on DNS. And if we expand out, the name of my machine is service, so I'll expand that out. Look at the forward lookup zone, look at my domain name and expand that out. And what you'll see is a typical DNS setup. So this shows the start of authority pointing to server.bmw.local. So server is the name of this machine, bmw.local is the name of the domain. So the fully qualified domain name of this machine is server.bmw.local. The name server is, again, this machine. And we have the server record of 192.168.3.2, which is its IP address. Now, one of the things to look at here in DNS is if I do a right mouse click on the name of this machine up here, right mouse clicking down to properties, what I'm looking for is these forwarders. Now, I had on here these two DNS addresses on my network card when I promoted this to being a domain controller. So it's picked those two DNS settings up and used those as forwarders for this DNS server. So I can do a ping google.com.au and this DNS server will refer, if it doesn't know where Google is, will refer it to these two DNS servers for them to refer on to the internet service providers, DNS servers, etc., until it finds where www.google.com is. So if I just do a quick ping www.google.com, it'll name resolve back to the IP address. So that's this part here. Even if we can't actually ping through the TAFE network to Google, we can at least name resolve using DNS, and that's all we really wanted. Control C to stop that. Okay, so we've got a working domain controller, and DNS is installed. I just want to go to the tools and have a quick look at users and computers. So Active Directory users and computers, and we'll use this dialog box quite a lot. And I'm going to expand out my domain name, bmw.local. And if I click on domain controllers, you'll see that my machine server, which is a global catalog and is in the default first site name, is a domain controller in this domain. If I click on computers, there aren't any yet. We're going to install our Windows 10 machine in here, and it'll turn up in here, and it will automatically update DNS for us as well. So let's go to our Windows 10 machine. I'm going to log in as Yoda, password 9. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this machine to join the domain over here on this server. Now, the first thing we need to do is I would do an IP config/all, and I can see that my DNS server points to the IP address of my actual server, which means it should be able to join its domain, because remember, this is also a DNS server. My server is actually a DNS server as well. So, you know, we need to make sure that our clients actually have the domain's DNS server in the list, otherwise it can't join the domain. So now that we've got that, I'm going to join the domain. So if I go open the File Explorer, right mouse click on this PC and go to Properties. I've moved it and it's now, it's getting there. What we want to do is drag down and have a look at okay, so where do we actually do it? I'm going to go to Advanced System Settings. No, that's not the area. Okay, so cancel that. My Windows 10 machine's pretty slow at the moment. Features Experience Pack. Okay. I've got the little spinning wheel here, so I don't want to rename this PC. What I want to do is get it to join the domain. Okay. So at the moment you can see this machine's running really slow. Okay, let's put it back up again. Notifications, focus, power. Okay, so let's go hit the home button. Interesting. Okay. I'm going to hit the home button. Okay, so let's see where we can change okay. Okay, let's kill this configuration thing at the moment. It's doesn't seem to want to play nicely. Really, we should be able to just go right mouse click on this PC and properties. Again, it's going straight to the configuration. So this is a bit different from the regular Windows 10 for some reason. Okay, so this latest version of Windows 10 has moved places where you can find stuff. So I'm just going to go down to the search bar here, type in change name, and wait for the search engine to work. The search engine is unusually slow. It says change the workgroup name, which is what we want to do. So I'm just going to click on open. So now we're at the system properties, and if we hit the, rename the computer or change its domain or workgroup, which is what we want to do, we hit change, click on the domain, and type in BMW. Because that's the domain I want to get into. BMW? That's my domain, is BMW, bmw.local. So if I type in that, it says, give me the username and password of an account that will allow this machine to join the domain. So that's going to be administrator and password 9 in the domain. And it should come up in a minute and say, welcome to the domain. The only thing I can think of is why this is so slow at the moment is the fact that it's got 3 DNS servers. So later on I'm going to take out those other 2 DNS servers and let it just have the local DNS server. So it does say welcome to the BMW domain. So I press OK, and close. It wants to do a restart. So I'll let it do a restart now. So this machine's now joined the domain. If I whiz back to my server and click on, hit refresh on the computers here, you'll see that my Windows 10 Pro machine's now turned up as a member of the domain. The other thing I want to look at also is in the tools under DNS, if I expand out the forward lookup zone into the domain, you'll see that my Windows 10 Pro has put its IP address into DNS automatically for me, which is a very handy feature because that means all the client machines automatically update DNS, and even if they get an IP address via DHCP, they'll update DNS, and so every machine can find every other machine in the domain. So that's what DNS is good for. What I am going to do is check on Windows 10. I want to log in, but I want to log into the domain rather than the local. So I'm going to say this is the BMW domain. So I'm going to log in just as administrator, password 9, and that okay, you can see that it's trying to log into the local machine because we've got a local administrator account as well. So what I'm going to do is put in BMW / to make sure that it's logging into the domain. And I'm going to do an IP config on this, and I believe that it'll still have the 3 DNS servers, and I believe that's why my Windows 10 machine is running slow. Now, because I've logged in as administrator in the domain, that's a new profile. Like, I haven't signed in as the domain administrator before, so new profile, it does this usual thing of creating a profile for you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Internet Explorer and web browse into the router over here. So if I 192.168.3.1, which is our gateway, and it's going to go, are you really sure? And we'll go, yeah, give us more information, and go to the website anyway. Okay, so while that's doing that, I'm going to go back to Windows 10. I'm going to type in CMD. And see if it comes up. Okay, it says it was blocked because it wasn't signed by a valid certificate. I'm just going to hit the refresh and do it anyway. And I'm going to go more information and go to the website anyway. So this is going to be admin, and it should remember the password for me. I want to go to the DHCP, and I'm going to get rid of those second and third DNS entries. So I'm going to get rid of that one, and I'm going to get rid of that one. I'm just going to leave the 3.2 so that our client machines don't get confused. They have one DNS server to go to, which is the server in their domain. So I'm going to hit the save button here. Okay. And when I go back to my Windows 10 machine, what I want it to do is okay, it's having a little dummy spit. So right mouse click on there, go run, type in CMD and go enter. And I'm going to go ipconfig/all. And you can see here I've still got all 3 DNS servers, and I believe that's what's causing the problem at the moment. I want it to just have this first one. Now I've changed the DHCP server on my Zero Shell, my gateway, the thing that's giving out IP addresses to the Windows 10 machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to go get a new IP address, hopefully without these 2 DNS servers. So if I do an IP config/renew, it's got a new IP address. Well, it's actually the same one. And if I do an IP config/all, you can see now that I've only got the 1 DNS server, not the other 2 from the Wollongong West. So I believe that will speed this machine up because it's not trying to contact 3 different DNS servers, it's only contacting 1, and that should make it a lot faster. And it's contacting the one that is the domain controller in this domain. So that's sort of like a local connection, rather than the other 2 having DNS settings that went out through the firewall, through the Zero Shell router out to the Wollongong West network. Okay, so this thing's now joined the domain, and that appears on our server when we look at our Active Directory users and computers. We can see here in the computer that we've got our Windows 10 Pro machine there, and on our domain controller we can see server. So we've got a domain controller, we've got our Windows 10 machine join the domain. What we need to do now is create some users and groups, and then create some shared resources. So on the Active Directory users and computers, so I'll just go back to there, clicking on the users down the bottom. These are all the default, sort of like the default accounts that are created when you create the domain. So these are sort of like classed as built-in accounts. You can see they're built in. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right mouse click and create a new group. I'm just going to call this group 1. I'm going to leave it as a global security group and go OK. And I'm going to create a new group called group 2. Exciting names, I'm sure. So I'm going to put users in each of those groups. So right mouse click new user, U1. He's going to log in as U1. He's going to have a password of password 9. And I'm going to untick that he needs to change his password at the next login, and I'm going to set that his password never expires. That's not what you'd normally do in a domain environment, but it's okay for testing purposes at the moment. Normally I'd have he must change, and I'd have password expires every 30 days or something like that, but we can set up a password policy later on. Next, finish. Okay, so we just created a U1, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use U1 as a sort of a template to additional users. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add him to a group. I'm going to add him to, I'll just put GR and check the name, and I'm going to add him to group 1. So that ad's been successful. If I click on group 1 and look at the members, you'll see, oh actually I think I must have had these two things highlighted as well. I did. Remove that. Remove that. Okay, so U1 is a member of group 1. So that's a trick. Don't have lots of things highlighted when you start adding things to groups. Only have the one thing that you're looking at. So I'm going to create a new user, U2. 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 And password 9. Password 9. And again, he's going to have password never expires. Finish. Okay, so we've got U2. Now U2 is not a member of anything. If I double click on him and look at members of, he's a member of the domain users, but not of any of the other groups. So, you know, what I'm going to do is instead of adding it from the user, I'm going to add it from the group side. So if I double click on the group and look at the members, I'm going to add a member from the group side. So I'm going to add U, check the names, and I'm going to add U2 to the group. So that shows that you can add members to a group, or you can add users to a group. So you can do it either way. The other thing that I want to do is to show you is I'm going to copy U1 to U3. So I'm going to go copy, and this is where the idea of the template. So I'm going to go U3, U3, and you'll notice he's already got the password never expires. It's picking up the settings from U1. Password 9, password 9, and hit next and finish. And you'll find that U3 is automatically in the group because U1 was, and I copied him from U1. So I click on group 1, look at the members, and you'll find U3 is already in there. So the idea of having a template user is actually fairly powerful. I could create one template user and create multiple users and put them in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create users for group 2 but I'm going to put them into group 2 all in one hit. Okay, so I'm just going to create a couple of users. So new user, B1. It's going to log on as B1. Password 9, and his password never expires. Okay, copy him to B2. Password 9, and his password never expires is already there. But B1 and B2 aren't members of any groups yet. So if we have a look at group 2, look at the members, there's no members in here. So what we want to do is do both of them in one hit. So you can just highlight both, and you remember I had multiple things highlighted before and I added them to a group. You can do the same thing. So I can go right mouse click on this and add to a group, and it's going to add both users to the group. So I'm going to go group, check the name, and I'm going to add them to group 2 and go OK. So I've added them both to group 2 in one hit because I had both of them highlighted. So I could highlight 10,000 people and I'll add them all to the one group at a time if I wanted to. So I click on group 2 just to check. We'll look at the members, and you'll see B1 and B2 were added at the same time. So that gives you a bit of an idea of creating users, putting them in groups, how to add them users into groups. So you can add them individually, or you can add them a group at a time, or you can go to the group and then go back and add users. So it's sort of flexible in the way that you do this. So what's the idea behind users and groups? Well, my group, group 1's currently got 3 users and group 2's only got 2. But that could easily be 1,000 and 10,000 users in a group. And what I can do is I can apply settings against the group rather than the individual user, and it applies to everybody that's a member of that group. Now, if you remember the domain users, if we look at the members of the domain users, it's actually got everyone in there. Okay, it's got the administrator, this other one I don't even know who it is, plus B1, B2, U1 to U3. So as I created these users, they automatically get added to domain users, so they're members of the domain. Okay, so what we're going to do is over here on our Windows 10 machine, I'm going to log in as say U1. So if I go down to here and I go administrator, honestly, right mouse click, sign out. So I'm signing out of the administrator account. I'm going to log in as another user, and I'm going to log in as U1. Logging into BMW, so password 9. BMW is the domain in my case. So now I've just logged in as a new user. Of course, it's a new user, so it's a new profile. So it goes, hi, hello, I'm creating a new profile. It's just Microsoft taking its time creating a profile. Now, where does the profile get created from? There's a local default profile on the machine when you install the operating system, and it uses that. Now, if there's a default profile in the domain, you can have it use the default domain profile rather than the local profile, default profile. Okay, so here's user 1. If I click on that, it's going to come up with all this. Yeah, you can see it's U1 there. I don't like this new Windows system much. Can I change it? Personalize. What I don't like is all this stuff. I'll have a look at that later. We can change the picture in the background. So there's probably ways that we can change and get rid of some of this stuff as well. Anyway, I'm old school that way. So back to our server. We've created users and groups. What we're going to do now is create a shared resource and test to see what sort of level of access those users in the different groups have. Now, it's actually important here to make sure that your share and file level permissions are identical. So I'm going to use the file manager and go to this PC, go to drive C, right mouse click, create a new folder. Now I'm going to be a little bit tricky here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a folder that we're going to use later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a folder called it wallpapers. Wallpapers, okay. And I'm going to do a right mouse click on wallpapers and go down to properties. And then there's two tabs on here that we're really interested in. One's called sharing, the other one's called security. Sharing is sharing out that resource, which is sort of a networking type thing. Security is an NTFS file level permissions, which is quite extensive. So, and we need to make sure both of these things match. So I'm going to go to sharing. And because we're network administrators, we always go advanced sharing. And we tick the box to share the folder, and then we go down to permissions. And in here, you'll see that everyone has access, read access to that folder. We don't want everyone, because everyone means whether they're in the domain or not in the domain. So we want to limit this to only people who are in the domain have access to this shared folder. So I'm going to remove everyone. And then I'm going to add three groups. I'm going to add in group 1. Actually, I'm going to highlight and add group 1 and group 2 in one hit. It comes up as group 1 and group 2. I'm going to add both of those in one hit. So group 1, I want to have read only, and group 2, I want them to be able to change stuff that's in that folder. Now, normally I would put the groups that I want to have access that shared folder, and I always put in one additional group called the administrators group. So I'm going to add in the administrator. So if I just type in ADM, the first 3 letters, and go check the name, it'll come up with everything that starts with ADM, and the single picture there is just the single user, whereas the double picture there, or a group of people, is the administrators group. So I'm going to want administrators group and go OK. And OK. So now I've added the administrators group to this shared folder as well, but I want administrators to have full control. So administrators is sort of like my back door. All network administrators have full control over the network in this case, whereas group 1 has read, group 2 has read and change. Okay, so that's the sharing done, which is only half of it. The other side is the NTFS permission. So I'm going to press OK on this, and I'm going to go to security, which, and by the way, you'll see that the network path is currently /server, which is the name of the server, / the share name. So it's /server name / share name. Okay, and that's how you access it. So I'm going to go to security, which is the NTFS level security, and you can see there's a bunch of stuff in here already. Okay, what I want to do is, because we're network administrators, we always go advanced. And you can see under the advanced that all of these users and stuff that's already allowed access to this folder has all been inherited from the root directory of drive C. It's all been inherited. So what I do is I disable inheritance because with inheritance, sometimes you just don't know who it is that's going to be able to have access to your shared folders. And I don't want that. I want to explicitly control who gets what level of access to my shared folders. So what I do is I disable all inheritance. So there's a button here that says disable inheritance. And I don't want to convert them. I want to remove all inherited permissions. So I remove all inherited permissions. Nobody has access to this shared folder under NTFS. So I'm going to go OK. And it says, are you really sure nobody's got access to this thing? And I'm going to go yes, because I'm going to add them in here. So I'm going to go edit, and I'm going to add my two groups, group 1, group 2. And I'm going to add them in. And I'm also going to add in the administrators group, ADM, check the name, pick the group, administrators group, and add them in. Okay, so now I've got the same three groups in there as I have in the shared folders. I just need to make sure they've got the same level of permissions as in the shared permissions. So the administrators had full control, so they've got full control. Group 1 had read only. So here, when you look at full control, modify, read and execute, list, read, and then write. So obviously these three here, read and execute, list and read, are the basic ones you need for read access. With our shared group 2, they also had change on the share permissions, which means they should also be able to write. Read and write. Change, as in the shared form of the permissions. So this is the NTFS, so it's going to be read and write. Okay, so once I've done that, I've got my permissions in NTFS matching the permissions that I've got that are shared. And I'm going to hit OK. And close that. And I'm going to test my access to this folder here. So I'm just going to put a spare new text document. It's going to call it test, and inside it I'm going to put test and file save and exit out. Okay, so that's what's the file that's actually in this wallpapers folder. And sorry, I should show that. Drive C, wallpapers. There it is. We can see the test. So I'm going to access this from my Windows 10 machine, logged in as different users. Now remember, I'm logged in here as U1, which is a member of Group 1, which means he's only got read access. So how do we actually get to the shared folder? If you remember the path of our shared folder, when we look at the properties and have a look at the sharing, that's the path. Okay, that's the path. So / server name and then the share name. So on my Windows 10 machine, I'm going to open up my file manager, and up in here I'm just going to go / server, and it shows me all the shared folders on that server machine, and one of those is wallpapers. Now you'll notice there's also netlogon and sysvol. These are shared folders that are created when we created the domain. And so they are domain specific shares, and I can put stuff in there that will affect the entire domain. So things like login scripts, obviously that goes with the netlogon. Okay, so I can put stuff in there, and they will automatically apply to everybody in the domain. So these folders are essentially the root of the domain, a bit like C:/ is the root of the hard drive. Okay, so this is the root of the domain. These are the shared folders. Now I've also got this wallpapers folder, which I can access, and I can read this, and I can go test, and I might want to put some extra stuff in here, and I want to go file, save. And I want to save it as testing. I want to save it as a different file name. Now remember, U1, who I'm logged in as, is a member of group 1, and they don't have permissions to do anything except read. So I cannot write and I cannot change the file. Okay. So I don't have permissions to do anything apart from read it. Can I actually modify the name? Can I rename it to testing? No, I don't have access for that either. So I can't change anything in this folder because I'm a member of group 1, and that was the permissions I gave to group 1. So as a member of group 1, those permissions also apply to me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out of this user, right mouse click, sign out, and I'm going to log in as B1, other user, B1, password 9. So B1 is a member of the other group. So it creates a new profile. And of course, Windows takes a little while to create a profile. Okay, so I've logged in as B2. I'm going to access the same share. /server. Go to the wallpapers. I'm going to try and modify or change the name. So I'm going to call it testing. And I don't have permissions. So I'm in group 2 and I don't have permissions to change the file. But I do have read and write. So I can read it. And I'm going to put some extra stuff in there and I'm going to save it. File, save. And that works because I can write. I just can't modify the name. So if I open this up again, you'll see that it's got the additional stuff there. So if I want to put some more stuff in, whoops, don't know what that was. Go away, clipboard. I must have hit the clipboard something. I'm going to go File, Save As, and I'm going to save this as test2. Don't have permissions. Okay, so I've got read and write, but I don't have the ability to change the name or to create new files. I can read and write existing files, but I can't create new ones. So how does that work? If we have a look at our permissions back here on the wallpapers, properties, down to security, and let's have a look at a difference between group 1. So group 1, I was able to read the file and then rewrite the same file, but because I didn't have modify, this one here, I can't actually create new files, nor can I change the name of existing files. What I can do is I can write to existing files, which is more than what group 1 can do because they don't have write capability. So they can't modify anything, they can't write, there's all they can do is read. Now just having read access is actually can be an issue because it means I can copy the file and yeah, so I can copy the file. Test2. So I'm in there as test2, the file's been created, so I can put stuff in there, file save. Yep, I can save. Okay, so there we are, I'm saved. Okay, so that's the different types of access that we can have. Depending on what group we're in. So what I need to do now is we're going to have a look at some of the automation side of having a domain controller. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at things like creating policies that apply to users. And one of the first ones we're going to do is if I open up Google Chrome, the question is, can I get out to the internet? Well, let's go www.google.com.au. Okay, found find its location and send it to pin it to the taskbar. I'll do. That's what I want to do. So you can see here google.com.au, we couldn't reach it. However, if I ping www.google.com.au, you can see that I can name resolve it. So DNS gets there. So the problem is not DNS. I should be able to get to the website. The problem is not having a proxy. So if I have a look at the proxy settings on here, can I do that from here? Settings, advanced system, is it? Proxy settings. You'll see that there's no proxy. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to automate that the proxy gets applied to everyone. What we're going to do is go back to our server, and on the tools here we're going to use a thing called group policy management. So on the group policy management, we're going to expand out the forest, expand out the domains, expand out my domain, and you'll see some settings here. One of them is a default domain policy, which is applied to all authenticated users. That means everybody who's currently signed into the domain, this applies to. If you're not logged into the domain, it doesn't apply to you. If you're not a member of the domain, it certainly does not apply to you. So it's only people that are currently logged into the domain that it can apply for. This authenticated users is quite an important group to use. So we can actually apply group policies against domain controllers as well. Now, what I want to do is, because proxy settings relate to absolutely everybody in this domain, I'm going to use the default domain policy. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to create two policies, one for each of the groups. So the way you do that is just right mouse click on your domain name and go create a group policy and link it here. And I'm going to call this one group 1 policy. And I'm going to create another one. And I'm going to call that group 2 policy. Okay, so now I've got a group 1 policy and a group 2 policy. And you'll notice that they're both applied to all authenticated users, not just the group. So we're going to have to fix that later on. Okay, so looking at the default domain policy, it applies to all users in our domain that are logged in. If I right mouse click, I can edit that policy. And right down the bottom here under preferences, in the control panel settings and under the internet settings is where I can set internet settings for all computers. So I'm going to go right mouse click in here and go a new Internet Explorer 10 is the way that you do it. And here I could put in a new home page. And I can have that apply to everybody in the domain. So if I had an intranet site that all people needed to go to, then I would put it here. I'm actually looking at the connections and down to LAN settings. And it's in here that I can actually put the proxy server settings in. So I'm going to click on that and type in proxy.tafeNSW.edu.au and port number 8080. Now you'll notice that the settings here are underlined in red. The underline in red means they will not apply. So even if I set this policy up, they will not apply. We have to make these things green, so like you can see the green up here. If these things are green, then they will apply. The way to get it to go green is to hit the F5 key. Now that's not documented very well. It took me a little while to find that myself. So F5 and it goes green. What I also want to do is I want to go to the advanced and I want to tell the local machines not to go to the proxy server if they're looking at local addresses. So everything that starts with the 192.168.3 dot asterisk. So anything that starts with 192.168.3, I haven't got a space in there, have I? Nope. Just checking. They do not use the proxy server for these addresses. So I'm going to go OK there, and it overrides, and I need to tick the box here. Okay, so I've now got proxy settings in here. So if I click on OK and OK again, you'll see that I've got this preference internet settings created. And you can see it's under user configuration, preferences, control panel, internet settings, and in the internet settings I've put in the proxy server settings. So this will apply to all authenticated users in the domain. I'm going to go File and Exit because we applied this to the default domain policy, and that applies to all authenticated users. Now, in order to push this out and make sure that it happens straight away, I generally run the command line, and I'll go nope, I want to just run it. And what I'll do is I'll run a command line thing called GP for group policy, update space /force. So what I'm doing is I'm forcing out the group policy. This is just a nice simple way to do it from the command line, GP update /force. And you can see the computer policy's gone out, and now the user policy will go out. Okay, so we need to test this. Back on our Windows 10 machine, you can see that we don't have proxy settings at the moment. I'm going to log out and log back in again, and I'm hoping that I will pick up the settings that have been put out via group policy. So I'm going to exit out of this. I'm going to go right mouse click and sign out. I'm going to log back in as B1, password 9. And now I'm going to open up my Google Chrome and see if I can get out to, yes, I do want to set it as default, and you'll notice it's out to Google, but we need to test that. So let's go images, Fox, and you can see I'm out. So my proxy settings must be working. Okay, I'm going to go check that. So I'm going to go down to the settings, advanced, system, click on the proxy settings, and you can see here that the proxy settings are actually in there, including the exclusions that I put into the group policy. So this applies now out to all of the clients. So I can log in as a different user and that will apply. So I'm going to sign out of B1. I'm going to log in as U1, who's in a different group, but we're going to check to make sure that that they get the proxy settings as well from the default domain policy. So U1, password 9, and hit OK. Okay, so let's go to Google Chrome. It goes to the welcome first. Let's go www, say dogpile.com or some place like that. Somewhere completely different. And it goes to Dogpile. So the internet's definitely working. My proxy settings are working for a user that's in a completely different group to B1. So here I am, U1. I'm logged in as a member of the domain, so it applies to me. I get this proxy settings, and I don't have to worry about going to, put proxy settings into all of the clients' machines. It just happens automatically. So in this, our small network, that's not a real issue because we've only got like one computer. But if, say, you're the Commonwealth Bank and you've got 10,000, I don't want to have to go and touch all 10,000 client machines in order to put proxy settings in. That would just be annoying. I'd rack up frequent flyer points, but it'd be annoying. So being able to do it via group policy is really, really handy. Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do now is use our two, I'm just going to minimize this because I'm going to need this GP update force a bit later on when I change some more group policies. Remember, we created this group 1 policy and group 2 policy. So what we're going to do is we're going to give these two groups a different home page, so they go to a different home page. We're also going to give them a different desktop wallpaper, and we're also going to deploy some software out as well using these two different group policies. Okay. First of all, we need to make sure that they apply only to those groups. Currently, if I click on group 1 policy, you can see it applies to all authenticated users, which means also people in group 2 and any other group. We want it to be only group 1. So I need to get rid of authenticated users as a group. So I'm going to click on that and go remove. And it says, are you really sure? So I'm going to go OK. And it comes up with a message which is important. Group policy requires that each computer account to have permissions to read a group policy object data from the domain controller in order for user group policy settings to be successfully applied. Removing the authenticated users group may prevent processing of user group policies. Please add the domain computers or the authenticated users security group with at least read-only permissions. So you've got to have either one of those in order for the group policy to apply. We got rid of all authenticated users because we want to apply it to a group. But we can go domain computers. So what we're going to do is we're going to add DOM and go check the name. And we're going to click on domain computers. There's domain computers. That means all workstations. So this is not servers. just workstations. Okay, so this excludes servers. Domain computers is now, so it'll apply to all domain computers. But we don't want it to apply to all domain computers because that would work for every user that was logging into that domain computer, whether it was group 1 or not. So effectively, this is almost the same as authenticated users, isn't it? It applies to just about everyone. So what we're going to do is add in just group 1. So we're going to add in group 1. So now this applies to domain computers provided they're in group 1. Okay, which means this policy is going to apply. I'm going to do the same thing for group 2. So I'm going to add in group 2. I'm going to remove authenticated users, and it's going to come up with a, you know, be aware it's not going to apply. And then I'm going to add in domain computers, DOM, check the name, get domain computers, and put them in there. So now it applies to domain computers provided they're in group 2 for the group 2 policy. So that all makes sense, that we can actually apply these things to computers, to individual groups, but actually also to individuals. We can apply it just to a single person if we want to. You know, so if you're someone special in the domain, maybe you get your own group policy for settings or whatever. Or maybe it's they create a policy for locking people down and they apply it to individuals. Okay, so we could create a group policy and just shove that policy against that user and it would lock them down. Actually, what we'd do is we'd create a group, lockdown users, apply that against the lockdown users group, and then make that person a member of the group, and then that policy would apply to them. Okay, so group 1 policy applies to the right people. One thing I did want to show was if I go back to bmw.local, this is back to the whole domain, I can click on this linked group policy objects and it shows me how many policies are applied, but also the link order. So I can actually change the order that things get applied. So the default domain policy and then the group 1 policy, group 2 policy. So I can change the order of these so that different things pop up. So if I had a default wallpaper from the group policy and also a default wallpaper because I'm a member of group 1, then which one of those actually gets applied? Because there's 2 wallpapers potentially from 2 different group policies. So we'd need to maybe change the order in order to make sure that one applies over the top of the other one. So handy thing to know about link order. So I'm going to go back to group 1 policy, do a right mouse click and edit. Okay, so now I'm ready to put a wallpaper or a new, let's put a new home page on these guys first. So home pages, we're in the internet preferences. So let's go down to preferences, down to control panel, down to the internet settings. I can do a right mouse click new Internet Explorer 10 and I can put a home page in here. So group 1, let's make them go to Dogpile. Okay, so let's go http://dogpile.com. Okay, so that's where they're going to go to, but you'll notice it's a red underline, so I've got to hit F5 to make it green and then go OK. Okay, so that's where they're going to go to. Exit out and go to group 2. Right mouse click and edit it. Down to preferences, control panel, internet settings. Right mouse click create a new Internet Explorer 10. We're going to set them a different home page. http:// yahoo.com.au. There we go. So they're going to go to yahoo.com.au, and I'm going to hit F5 to make this green. So now it's green, it's going to get applied. We're going to hit OK, and I'm going to exit out of that group policy. So now on both of those group policies, they've got a different home page. So the next thing is, how do we actually put wallpapers on? And this is going to involve us going back to our wallpaper share and getting wallpapers actually in there. So if I go back to my file manager to drive C and have a look at my wallpapers, currently I've just got 2 text files in there, which I'm just about to delete. So Shift Delete, they're both gone. What I need is wallpapers or JPEGs in here. So how do I get those? There's 2 ways. I could drag it from the desktop of the host machine to the desktop of the guest machine and then move them into this wallpaper folder. Or I could try and go to create a shared folder between the host machine and the guest machine. I can do that. Or I can go directly back to the Wollongong West WWIT1 server from my internal server behind my firewall, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to be tricky and go back and get the wallpapers directly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go onto here and I'm going to /WWIT1 and click it, and what happens is nothing happens. It can't find it. Now the reason is because we're behind a NAT firewall. What I need to do is put the fully qualified domain name of that machine, and DNS will find it for us. Okay, so WWIT1 is a member of the wwitlabs.local domain. So the fully qualified domain name will be the name of the machine appended to the name of the domain. So .wwitlabs.local. So if I do that, it will now find that machine and ask me for a username and a password. So I'm going to go all students and student, and I'm going to remember that and go OK. That allows me to get into that server, and in the apps folder under pictures and diagrams I've got this wallpaper folder. So if I double click that, I've got all these wallpapers. I'm just going to go Control A, right mouse click and go copy, and I'm going to copy them to my local drive C into my wallpapers folder, paste. So that was a way of me using my internal server, virtual machine, our virtual server that's inside our network, to access the Wollongong West IT server's shared folders and retrieve files from it direct. Okay, and that's really the easiest way to do it. Later on, I'm going to get you guys to do this when we create a shared folder, get the right permissions in place, and deploy some software. So we'll do that via our group policies as well. Okay, so I've got all these pictures now on my local server. It's in a shared folder, and I know that the 2 groups have got read access to all the files. Okay, so they can read them. It's just a matter of picking a couple of pictures here that I want to use. So Vader's not bad, Splash underscore's not bad, Red 10's not bad. Yeah, so it's just a matter of picking a couple. Frogs, 001's not bad, Alina's a... Anyway, there's lots there, so I'm going to show you how to set up a wallpaper for a group now that I've got wallpapers in this shared folder. Okay, so on group 1 policy, right mouse click and edit it. Now the place to put wallpapers is under the user configuration in the policies rather than the preferences. Now everything to do with the internet, like home page, like proxy settings, were all a preference. This is a policy. So I'm going to expand out the policies, and I'm going to go down to administrative templates and expand that out. And then I'm going to click on desktop and expand that out, and then click on desktop. So after a while, you'll get to know where all these things are, or if you don't know, honestly, Dr. Google is pretty good. He can tell you where everything is. So if you're looking to shut down or lock down a particular thing or apply a particular setting to a client machine in your domain and you can't remember where that is in group policy, just do a quick search on Google and you'll find it. So here in desktop, I'm going to enable active desktop. So I'm just going to go standard so I can see it. Enable active desktop. I'm going to tick the box there and go OK. So now you can see it's enabled, and I want a new desktop wallpaper. Okay, so desktop wallpaper for group 1. Okay, so here in the desktop wallpaper, we want to enable it. And we've got 2 examples here. The first one says using a local path, C:\Windows web wallpapers home.jpg. Now, obviously, all of our clients, our 10,000 clients, maybe if we've got 10,000 clients, will not have this image on their local machine. So, best not using a local. What we really need is the network address. So, here using a universal naming convention, UNC, it says //server /the share, then the file name. So that's the methodology that we need in order to access the wallpaper by all of the clients, that they can access their wallpaper. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go wallpaper style. I want it to fill, and I want to use this convention here. So I'm going to go //server, because the name of my server is called server. You would have to call it whatever your name was. /wallpapers is the name of the share, and now I need the name of a file that's in that share. Now I just happen to know that there's one called red10.jpg. Okay, now before I go OK and apply this, I want to test it to make sure that that file is accessible. So what I do is I highlight all of that, go Control-C, right mouse click down here and go Run, Control-V, paste it in. Can I get to that file through the network addressing? Yes, I can. Okay. If I can't do that, my clients can't do that. So I need to test it. Okay. So red 10 works. Okay. So now I've got, you can see, enable active desktop, and I've put a desktop wallpaper on for group 1 policy. I'm going to exit out of the group 1 policy, and I'm going to go to the group 2 policy. Now remember, on the group 2 policy, we've put that it applies to all domain computers who are a member of group 2. We got rid of authenticated users. Okay, so don't forget, domain users allows, domain computers allows the group policy to apply, and group 2 limits it to just group 2. Okay, so we're going to edit this group 2 policy. I'm going to edit, and remember, we've already put the preference in here for the home page. We want to go to the desktop. So expand out the policy, user policies, administrative templates, to the desktop, and click desktop. We want to, if you hit the standard, it won't have the description, because if you click on this, it tells you a description of what it actually is. So if you go standard, it doesn't show the description. So on the active desktop, I want to go enabled, and I want to go OK on that. So now it's enabled. And now I want to look at the desktop wallpaper. I want to enable it. And remember, the last thing I had in here was I control pasted the last one. So I'm going to go control V to put that in, but then I'm going to change the name. Okay, so the name of this one's going to be, well, I could go Vader, or I might go Splash, S-P-L-A-S-H underscore, Splash underscore. Okay, and I do want this thing to be centered, filled. My apologies. Helps if you can spell splash. S-H. Splash. I'm going to test this first of all though. Let's copy all of that. Control C. Right mouse click on the start. Go run. Control V to paste it and hit enter. And my picture comes up, so I know that my clients will also be able to access that file. Okay, so I'm happy with that and go OK. So we've got a new home page and a new wallpaper for clients. Now I've made some changes to group policy. What I need to do before that applies is I'm going to go down to my command prompt, and I'm going to type in the GP update /force. In my case, I just hit the up arrow and hit enter, because that was the last thing I did in the command prompt anyway. So this will force out that group policy to all my clients. The computer policy is out, and the user policy will be out now as well. That's good. So if I go to my Windows 10 machine, and I'm going to log out, I'm going to log in as U1, that'll do, password 9. Okay, so what I want to see is I didn't get a wallpaper then. Okay, so I'm going to log out and log back in again. Shut down, so I'm going to sign out. And I'm going to sign in again. So use one password 9. It's a bit slower now, so I think it's applying the group policy. There's my wallpaper. So what's my home page? Was it dog pile? Let's just check. No, not yet. That's because I didn't use Internet Explorer. Let's use Internet Explorer. IEXPL, I explore. I wonder whether Edge picks it up. Oh no. Did I press Edge? I shouldn't have done that. Oh, that's going to do all this. Welcome to the new Microsoft Edge rubbish. Can I get rid of that? Probably. Right mouse click. Close the window. Okay, let's get out of it. Okay. So, what I want to know is whether the settings are there for the home page. So I'm going to open up my Google Chrome again. And I'm going to go to the settings on Google Chrome, advanced, and and settings. The proxy settings are there. Okay. So what I need then is the that's default browser, safety auto. Okay. Okay, so how do we get Internet Explorer to work? Yeah. Does that work? IEX. Looks like my search bar is dead, yes. Nope, it popped up. It was just really slow. And you'll notice that Dogpile did apply. So it is there, it's just that Chrome and Edge are not applying it.
I looked up how to do it. You've got to download like a policy thing.
Yeah, in order to support the latest version of the browsers, you have to update group policy to add in additional things for you to configure. So basically, the latest version of browsers break group policy, and you have to modify group policy in order for it to work. Yes, it does work. Like, you know, the default homepage comes out, the wallpaper comes out. So what I want to do is sign in as a different user. So I sign out of user 1, and I'm going to sign in as B1. Okay, so you can see the wallpapers applied. I'm going to make the assumption that Internet Explorer is also applied. I explore. If my search bar will actually work. Yeah, it did. I'm going to pin this thing to the taskbar as well. So yep, so it's there. If I open it up, it should go to yahoo.com.au, which it does. Okay, so the home page in the group policy works. The wallpapers work how they're supposed to. So now we're going to move on to deploying some software via group policy.